Hello everyone. We have the joy and the privilege of being with Veronica O'Keane, the author of an amazing book, this one, The Rag and the Bone Show. Thank you for being with us, Veronica O'Keane. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cristian. It's very special to be talking to somebody in that part of the world at the moment. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. The book has recently been translated by Lifestyle Publishing House. My first question is this: how did the neurosciences catch up, or almost catch up, Marcel Proust? There is also in your book published in Romania, in the translation of Romania, a translation problem, the old translation and the new translation about the title of Marcel Proust. So how did the neuroscience catch up, Marcel Proust?
Well, that's what I opened the book with. And initially, the book, Cherchez du temps perdu, which is the French version of it. My French accent is very poor, but that means it was initially translated as remembrances of things past. And then when it was newly translated, it was translated as in search of time past. And I think the reason I say that neuroscience has taken a long time to catch up with Marcel Proust is because really memory is about a search. It's not about opening a filing cabinet and pulling out a file. That will be there intact. What we do when we remember things is we're being taken by our brain down a winding path of a story, where many stories intersect in our lives and many events happen, and knowledge will intersect as well, and emotions. So all of these things are flowing together simultaneously in the brain. So as Proust said, we're not finding memories. We're really searching through our lives and through our knowledge and through what we've learned and through experience that has been laid down in our brain for our memories.
Mm-hmm. Do the modern science on the subject of memory bring us much benefit? I mean, more and more significant than the arts, than the literature, the modern science?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, because I guess what I quote literature a lot in my book, because I think the great introspective artists, and all great artists are really very introspective. And when they are describing experience, they have done that before neuroscience has understood what that experience might be in terms of the way the brain works. So, for example, Marcel Proust, when he was going through his memory pathways, and particularly when he was using smell to remember things, and he understood that sensation triggers memories. And it took a long time for neuroscience to understand the pathway, for example, between smell and between memory. So I think what the arts do is they bring us to a level of subjective experience. They suck us in to ways of experiencing the world. And that's a completely different thing to explaining it. And I think most of us like both. Most of us like understanding things through personal experience and being able to imagine things as you feel them. And then we also like to understand brain explanations of them. And I think for human beings, both facets of experience and knowledge are equally fascinating. So I certainly would say to people, you know, the arts feed your imagination and feel your emotional knowledge and your empathy with people. And your new experiences, they'll create new spaces in your brain. And the neurosciences, I think, are equally expansive. And they also broaden the way you see the world, but they do it in a completely different way.
Mm-hmm. I have a question with two roots. On the one hand, what is very intuitive about what we know regarding to the memory? On the other hand, what is very discouraging about what we know also regarding to the memory? Intuitive and non-intuitive, intuitive and discouraging.
So, well, I suppose what is non-intuitive about memory is, I suppose, the idea that we don't have direct recall to things as they happened. And I think that's a very important point of memory. You know, we're all familiar with the experience of going over old events with past friends and with family, and there's disagreements about when it happened, who was there, what exactly happened, and somebody would say, oh, well, I said that, and they said, no, I said that. So memory is very, very subjective, and the further away we get from memory, the more contaminated it becomes. So every time you remember something, what you're actually doing is you're disrupting a collection of neurons. Because memory is essentially, it's the way neurons connect with each other. So if neurons are connected in a certain way, that represents a memory. When you remember that, what you're actually doing is you're lighting up that group of neurons, and that lighting up is energy. And they can come back together in slightly different ways then, because of the experience we're having at the moment. So for, if example, you're remembering an event with an old friend, and they say, well, I don't think that's the way it happened. I think this is the way it happened. When you remember that event the next time, it will be contaminated, if you like, or made a little bit less certain. Your version will be by what they have said to you. So I think that's, you know, we all need to question the certainty of our memories. And the other thing is, and I think this is more important in a way, is to look at why our memories may have changed. And I think as we grow older, we grow wiser and we understand the world better. And the way we understand the world is often reflected in the way we remember things. So the way I remember something now from my past is I understand things about it now that I wouldn't have then. So that memory brings with it a sort of recollection of how I've changed and of other processes of change in me. So memory is very fluent. It's very much alive in the present, and it's a part of the present. It's not a part of something that's back there. It's here and now. As you and I are speaking, we're laying down new memories. And the other question you asked about non-intuitive, the most discouraging aspect of memories, was it? Okay. I suppose what I'd have to say about the most discouraging aspect of memory is probably related to the same thing, and that is subjectivity bias. And I find this particularly disturbing in terms of collective memory and history. And, you know, there's a fantastic example of that going on in Russia at the moment, where, you know, collective information and knowledge is being presented in a way that is stimulating a very specific memory and exploiting that one memory, rather than different inputs coming in and stimulating all sorts of different memories that would give us a more balanced perspective of things. And we find this in history a lot, really, that the way historical events are recounted changes with the circumstances, the political circumstances of the day. And I find that quite dispiriting, because I think that we should have a duty to recall things as they happened and not with the meaning that we now give them.
Mm-hmm. Which memories are more resilient, the most beautiful, the most pleasant, or the strongest, the most traumatic memories?
Whichever brought the strongest emotion is the short answer to that. So in a normal life, you have to have traumatic memories because people that you love die, and people that you love will get very sick, and different things happen to us that are traumatic. Life is traumatic. And then, of course, hopefully in our lives, we also have happy events. And so whichever is strongest for you, I'm very lucky because my own childhood, I did not have much trauma and I had a lot of happiness. So for me, my memories of childhood are not very complicated, although each individual person's development is hugely complex. I'm not saying it's not complex, but it's not complicated in an emotional way, in the way I recall it. I have a kind of glowing sense of happiness when I consider my past. But of course, that's not true. Some children are born into conditions that are traumatic. And, that happens among the socioeconomically disadvantaged, those who are born into situations of violence, like those poor babies who were born in the Ukrainian hospital yesterday, and, racism and so on and so forth. So if those memories are stronger, they're the ones that are going to be a driving force for you in life. And the other important thing about what memories are most prominent is the condition that you are now in your life. So if you're depressed, for example, you will only remember the unpleasant things from your past life. You'll remember bad things. You'll think about your mistakes. Your past life, reflecting on your past life, makes you feel guilty, makes you feel unworthy, makes you feel bad about the future. And then if you're in a good mood and if you're in a happy mood, you'd be more likely to remember happy things. So it depends on what has happened to you, and it depends on how you now are in the world. And lastly, I think it depends on how you're able to manage your emotions and how much you understand your own past. Because we can have memories of traumatic events that happen to us without being overwhelmed with the negative emotions. So in other words, if you work on what has happened to you in the past, try and understand it and try and resolve it, what psychotherapists would call digesting it, well, then they can remain as traumatic memories, but without that overwhelming post-traumatic stress disorder emotion that people get.
Mm-hmm. What is the autonomy of memories? Do they have, let's say, a life of their own?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say yes, they do. Yeah, they do, because in some ways, our brains are telling us what is important. Our memories are telling us what is important. So whatever resonates with me, I will remember. So, but the reason it resonates with me is because of my memory. So my memory sucks things in and gives them significance, if you see what I mean. So in a sense, my memory, your memory, everybody's memory does have a life of its own. But I would come back to that point that, you know, we do have control over ourselves, but we need to be aware of that control and we need to direct it. So we need to be aware. So if, for example, your brain is taking in negative things all the time, you know, you need to ask yourself, why is this significant for me? Why is this emotional memory pathway there for me that is lighting up horrible emotions in my brain? So if you're in a situation like that, your memory is controlling everything. It has a life of its own. But if you decide, well, I don't like this, I don't like being in a state where I'm being traumatized all the time by these memories. So it's the memories that are traumatic, really, rather than the current experiences. Well, then you can decide to modify those memories, if you like, to disconnect the memories from the horrible emotion. And so, yes, it has a life of its own, but that is not to say that we haven't got an ability to change that.
What is the red in the bone show? Why is so, let's say, oriental about our memory, like an oriental market, like an oriental show?
Well, because it is like a bazaar, because we don't, it's full of treasures that we may be unaware of. And I suppose the other thing, it's like a bazaar, it's labyrinthine. So rather than neural pathways being straight lines that connect things in a geometrical pattern, it's very intricate. And it's very, in a sense, I use the word quite a lot, happen chance, which means that a lot of things occur as if by chance. You know, some memories are very flimsy or delicate, and others are very powerful. So the way your memory leads you is not a straight line. It's, you know, it's a bazaar full of surprises and delights and magic, and also sometimes into darker corners of your past and of your mind that you may not want to go. So it's unexpected, it's unpredictable in that sense.
Are art, literature, good forms, good containers to preserve memories?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think, as I said before, I think the arts and literature should appeal to us at an emotional level, that at a level of experience. It doesn't have to be an intense emotion, but I do think that you know, you can suck people in with memory, and that's a very powerful force. So what a writer is doing is they're trying to wind their way into somebody's memory and to make it resonant. So what they do is they use the format of the story, of time, place, and person. But of course, the postmodern writers, in a sense, don't do that. What they do is they almost deconstruct things and get you in there in an oblique way. But whatever way the artist gets you in there, whether it's in, you know, the old classical way of pulling you into a narrative, pulling you into a story, or whether it's in a way of sort of shocking your normal entry system, breaking it down and sort of jumping in, as it were, at you and surprising you. Whatever way it happens, I think literature and the arts bring us into an interior part of ourselves, into the interior, into the place where we put the world together at a human level. And I think it's really important to have that connection within ourselves, and to have that, because that connects us to other people and connects us to the world. And, this is hugely important function of art and literature, I feel, is that sort of communication at a direct human level of experience.
I have two more questions. First is this: do memories finally die when we die?
Well, I'm an atheist, materialist, so
Right.
I would say in an organic sense, when a brain dies, the memories within that brain die. But in a sense of human connectedness, I don't think so. I think it's a very lonely thing for a human person to die without their memory somehow belonging to other people. And I think, that is something we're all terrified of, is dying alone and being forgotten. And I guess a lot of artists really are trying to, they want to be remembered. We want to make a statement about ourselves. We want to enrich the world and in that way be remembered. So I don't think death is the end of what a person has done. So their memory and whatever insights they may have in the world, even if it's only passed on to their children and grandchildren or their very close group of friends, that's a very real thing. And that's a real thing in the people's brains who are alive. So in a sense, the connectedness, our human connectedness, ensures that memory survives. And I suppose, again, around the time of Charles Darwin, where he was talking about evolution, a lot of philosophers were thinking about, the evolution of knowledge. So I would say very much, we all stand on the shoulders of the people who went before us. And, they have created shortcuts for our memories. So now we don't have to wonder, about why apes might be like us. We know children learn in school when they're very young, but it took, thousands of years for human beings to learn that information. So in the sense that there is a collective knowledge that gets passed on from generation to generation and that we build on that, memory doesn't die.
So the last question of mine, connected with previous: do we survive as long as the last story told or invented by a human person?
Just, are you asking me that as long as human beings survive, will they tell stories, or are you saying something else?
Yes, in this sense. When
Yeah.
the last human being will die, then we will die, actually, because we are human.
That's exactly it. That is exactly what I believe. I think we are, the magic is the connection. In the same way that the magic in our brain is the way our brain is connected. It's the way our brains are connected to each other at the moment, and as is happening around Europe at the moment. I think we all have a sense of connection. And then, we're connected with those who have died immediately through emotional memories, and more long-term through knowledge and the way people have contributed to society and to giving us our freedoms.
We were in connection with Veronica O'Keane, the author of this book, The Rag and the Bone Shop. Thank you very much for this very beautiful conversation, and thank you very much for this amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cristian. It was delightful.